with Ryan? Were we talking about doing that? Or something. What to discuss. Explore.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. First up on our agenda, we have a couple presentations. First one is presentation on the Central Plaza Plan, final design process. Tom?
Yes, so today we have Patrick Dunn from RDG Planning and Design and some of his folks here. They're gonna kind of walk us through the process to take what's been approved in the Uptown Master Plan for the Plaza design concept to final design. Just before Christmas, we approved a contract and scope of services related to the project and taking, again, the conceptual design to a final design. So they're here, gonna walk through a little bit of a presentation on moving it forward and just kind of get everybody on the same page as it relates to that process timeline. And then, you know, throughout the process, we'll be doing some touch points, but I think it's good. They're on board. We got things moving forward. Let's just get it all out in the open so folks understand where we're at and where we're going. And with that, I just turn it over to Patrick and let him.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. Mask or no mask? Okay.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Thanks again. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity, Mayor, Council, to give a little bit of an update on our process. Patrick Dunn, RDG Planning Design. Also with me today is Sarah Petting. And so we've got 4 key things to talk about today. Four items on the agenda. First of all, I have the honor to introduce our design team to you so that you understand who you will see and who will be moving the project forward. Second item would be a little bit of a reminder of the conceptual design that's taken place over the last couple of years. Third item on the agenda would be to clarify the scope of services that currently we have with the city. And then finally talk, and as Tom mentioned, focus on the process, making sure you understand the milestones and the touch points that we would have with all of you. Next slide, next slide, please. So you see on the screen the faces of RDG and the faces of 3 consultants that we have on board. I could go into the details of each one of these, but ultimately we've got a broad spectrum of design professionals that represent not only the history of the last 2 years. So I've been involved in the project over the last 2 years, as has our principal in charge, Justin Platts. But we've got also consultants on board who have been a part of the project throughout the past. And these are consultants as well that have worked around the country on projects of similar scope and scale. Next slide. We're working with a group that you know well. And so this represents our technical committee. We've had one formal kickoff technical committee meeting. We've also today had a full day of on-site and meetings here in this facility, talking about programming, talking about some of the technical aspects of the project. So the project is moving forward, and we appreciate all of these folks' participation in the process. Next slide. A little bit of reminders. We'll go through these real quickly. Just an aerial view showing the park itself. This isn't quite up to date, of course. You know the current construction underway to the east side of this particular photo. Next slide. Beautiful sunny day with the depot, and it is a focal point. It is a part of our project to consider modifications and improvements to that depot facility. We'll talk a little bit about the scope of that here in a minute. Next slide. Inside, as you all know, just as a reminder of the open air nature of that facility and the opportunity for improvements. Next slide. And there are things that need some TLC and some improvement, as for example, the restroom facilities not meeting code currently, and the utility room, which will integrate into the needs of the greater park. Next slide. And we'll also, under our scope, is to consider what happens with this particular component of the park. Next slide. A reminder to all of us that the Central Plaza itself is a part of a trio of parks stretching from the north, the central, and the south. And the north, at least a portion of the north, is currently under construction as a part of the 7th Avenue project. And but it's just a reminder that this is one piece of the puzzle. It is a trio of spaces and components that all work together. Next slide. And these are just some images of the work under construction currently as a part of the 7th Avenue project that's coming to life. Next slide. So we've got 2 slides here. This is a winter slide. The next one will be a summer slide. And it is intended to be a 4-season with we put winter first because we believe there is a big component of this project that can improve and be a focal point throughout the year in the winter time especially. So you start to see some of the components, including the ice rink or the ice trail itself. You start to see the potential for wintertime use of the depot itself, not only for the functional needs of the mechanical space, but also for potential for concessions and warming and upgraded restrooms. Next slide. And then this transitions into a look as if it was more in the summertime with events happening. You can see white rectangular areas around that represent the potential for small canopies and for events to utilize the space in different ways. And then you also see some circular white circles in the middle that represents when the ice is not there, then that space, of course, can be used for summertime plaza and activities and events on that center area. Next slide. If you were standing on top or up on that construction tower crane, looking down towards the west at the park, this is a bit of a conceptual 3D view showing the components, including the play structure that is envisioned to be more sculptural in the circular area with a green surrounding it. You see the oval, which represents the ice trail area. You also see some dynamic water with splash and a stream that would flank that oval shape. And you also see some I guess I'll call them organic forms that stretch throughout on the pavement system that is intended to be representative of some life and organic and a root system and just movement throughout the pavement system. We've started some of that with a precedent in the North Plaza, and that will continue across the street down into this plaza. Conceptual in nature shown here. We'll advance that in the next several months. We're also working closely with the adjacent developer and design team to finalize and work on the system of integrating these two. You can see that on the lower portion of the screen, there is a conceptual staircase and a stair stepping of the grade from the Broad Main central area down to the plaza itself. So we're working to make sure that the integration and those two pieces fit together and that it feels like these two spaces were designed together. Next, please. Just a little bit more on the scope of the project. This as a reminder of the winter and summer. Next slide, please. You see here highlighted the major components of our scope, ranging from the historic restoration of the depot, or I should say the depot restoration, not necessarily historic in nature, but we've got the event stage that would be identified and added to the north end of the park. That would be intended to be a 360 event stage that would allow events to not only be presented to the park itself, but also to 7th Avenue, assuming that will be closed during certain major events. We've got the ice rink and water system. We've got the play area. We've got gardens and open space. And we've got some functional things as well, including the north-south corridor along the east side of the park, which would serve as a bike lane and as EMS and emergency access along there. And then, of course, studying the caboose itself. I think we only got a couple more slides. Focusing on the process. I think this may be the last slide, but I want to stop here for a minute and make sure you understand that we are consciously allowing the process to have milestones so that there's touch points for you and for the public and for the staff to make sure that we're on the right track. Here we are in February. We're coming up on the first milestone, which represents our efforts to take and to listen and understand the program and the desires of city staff, chamber, the public, assimilate all that and reflect that back to the technical committee here in the next week or so to make sure that we're on the right track from a pre-design and a programming standpoint. And then that will launch us into a schematic design. To date, what we have right now is conceptual in nature. It is just that. It is a master plan. It is a concept. It will change. It will evolve. But that said, we are moving towards integrating all of the components that have been identified in that master plan, unless you all let us know we need to change directions. So you'll have opportunities here beginning of March to have some touch points with staff. You'll have opportunities at the end of April to understand when we really have a schematic design package with costs and refined drawings. And then from there, we'll continue through a design development phase the next couple of months into construction documents for the summer, really, and then understand what kind of phasing and cost and funding opportunities there are for pieces of this to move forward, hopefully at the end of this year into phasing or to bidding and ultimately to construction phase. I think that's the last slide I had in the process. And I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify any. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the questions that I have, and I think I posed this a couple months ago, Tom, about the project, understanding that the concept now incorporates an ice rink. Now, I grew up in Minnesota, and so my notion of an ice rink in the middle of winter in a warming house is pretty deeply instantiated in my heart. So I'm a little curious. I understand this would be a refrigerated ice sheet. The mechanics, the mechanical and electrical needs for that would be in the renovated depot. And I'm very interested, in order to better understand that, what sort of life cycle costs relative to operations and maintenance that we're going to incur with that over, say, 5, 10, 15 years out, which really begs the question, for this style of ice rink, what is its projected lifespan prior to needing replacement? Because we're facing that, Seth, with our pool. So I think we should have life cycle information as well as projected longevity well in our thinking as we move down through this early phase of these projects.
Well, I can tell you that your questions and your comments that you just stated were very well represented today by city staff during our meetings. They charged us as a design team to do exactly what you said, give you the life cycle costs and the cost, the operational, all of those things as soon as possible. So we've been charged to do exactly what you asked, and we will do that in the next month and a half to 2 months.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Thanks. Appreciate that, gentlemen.
Just, and to add to that, if you forgive me for going forward, but along with the ice is the water. And there's a lot of internal mechanisms. There's different ways to handle that. There's costs on both sides. And we're also looking at that, and both consultants that are engaged in this process have already broached that subject matter with us and asking us the questions. So we're very early on, but I think we've got a great team that's brought up the questions, and so we're already noodling all that. So I think it's good. It's moving forward.
Sarah?
Kind of to piggyback on that, because I'm the other Minnesotan up here who grew up with ice rinks at my elementary schools. And we fought the hockey players to be able to use them. So I like the trail concept because you don't have to fight hockey players. But I guess my only thing, and this really doesn't need an answer, I just throw it out there, is as I look at it is, and I know there's novelties and things are really usually busy at the beginning and they kind of trail off. You don't always see that, but with our growing population and people looking for these family type of opportunities, I just hope it's sized to handle. I know you can't size for special events, those key impact days, but I'm hoping it's the right size so we don't build something that's really great and then have people get frustrated because there's just no space, if that makes sense. Because I'm hoping it's so popular that people are there. So based on your expertise in working in communities our size with these types of amenities, is this a natural size for what we're seeing in like the ice trail space?
Well, I can tell you that today we looked at several precedent projects around the Midwest. And as far as the size of the ice, and we have on our team folks who have direct experience with all of those projects. So I guess it's a balance, I suppose, of how much physical space do we literally have to accommodate this, and what makes sense for this size community. And we're trying to balance that. So that's, I guess, the only
It's
answer.
kind of like as we're updating or as we move along, I think that's kind of looking at building for now, but also a little bit projections into usage future
Mhm.
population, so that we don't build something that ends up being too small to handle the population size of people. So it's just more of a update to watch.
Everything we've,
So thank
during
you.
the
It looks
master
beautiful.
plan, we did, yeah, I think everything that we discovered during the master plan and heard from staff and other experts around the country, this seems to be in that target size for this community.
And then bike racks, all that, is that going to be like sculpture type of additions to this area? Or is that separate that we bring those in? Or maybe that's a Tom question.
That'll all be a part of that. We're looking at all the existing assets that are in the park to be, we've expanded the survey, so they're doing the whole park, taking the pieces that need to stay and ensure that they're there. And then also, we're going to probably get to the point where it's like the trash can goes here. It's going to be very specific, and that'll help. Seth, where's Seth? There's Seth. Seth, as he makes improvements to the park, he has a plan to go forward that's been approved, so that, we've all been in the situation when you're walking and you say, well, why is that there? The idea is that there's a reason behind it all. It's been through the appropriate boards and commissions, and decisions have been made to ensure that that protects everybody involved. The process will be solid. So that's the idea behind it. Yep. So there'll be decision points, no different than streetscape. We walked through a lot of those decision points with the council, and we'll continue to do that through this project as well.
Steve?
Yeah, can we go back a few slides to show the overall concept and the layout? That's fine. So can you explain what is happening in the lower right-hand corner? I think you called it shrubs or something else, where you got the green rows.
Mhm.
Exactly what is going on there?
Sure, yeah, the concept starting at the north end of that, where there's a green circle,
Yeah,
that would be a play area
right.
that would have special surfacing that meets requirements for safety around that play structure. And then moving south from there, the east-west bands, if you will, that are represented there are intended to be more landscape perennial annual beds that would have color and texture and some greenery and life to them that allow people to move through that area as well and interact with some of that plant material.
Does the very east end of this incorporate 11th Street now? Is 11th Street incorporated into this? When we say the plaza, I
Yep,
want to make sure we understand that that is now
correct.
incorporating 11th Street and we got all that extra area to bring into this, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I understand one of our major objectives is to make this a plaza area with more year-round amenities and ways to use it. So I'm completely in support of that. I have already made comments, though I have some concern about losing some of the green space that we're losing with some of this design. And I kind of understand what you're doing in that lower right-hand corner, but as I look at some of the major events going on up there, the concerts, all of the concerts that go on up there, if I look at the Marion Arts Festival, I'm just having a little bit more concern seeing how those are going to function as well with this layout. I'm 100% in favor of a permanent stage. I've been, saying for many years, we need a permanent stage somewhere. So I'm completely in favor of that. But I do have some concern all of a sudden with this layout, with everything that's incorporated in there, that if we want to put 3,000 people in that area for a concert, that we're not going to be able to do that. So I'm kind of open to comments. I mean, I know we talked about 7th Avenue being shut off. I don't know for what event you're talking about shutting 7th Avenue off for. So kind of how are we going to accommodate the crowds we've had in the past with this design?
And I think that is a question that we'll answer through the process and design process. We saw examples of where they have the ice trails and ice rinks in other communities that during the summer events, it operates as an area for seating. The one end of the ice area, I believe, if I'm correct, they're showing a water feature that would likely be a flush mounted feature that would have, seating in areas around it. So there's a dual purpose. It's difficult to show. And I think Pat's trying to show that the upper left-hand out inset photo is showing the summer view. And then the winter view is showing the ice. So that area would be open and usable. A lot of communities use it for seating, outdoor dining. There was food truck vendors and all kinds of things. So I think that'll be a conversation that we have throughout the process.
So the ice rink is what you're talking about, the size of the ice rink is that large oval on there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think we absolutely got to have that space available in the summertime. I mean, if that's not, then you lose.
Yeah, oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, you're making that whole entire area
Mhm.
only for about 3 or 4 months of the year. And that would be, I think, counterproductive to what we really want to do.
Mhm.
But you've answered a few of my questions. Thank you.
And on that, just to follow up, I'm assuming those that are our main users, Jill's on this committee, right? Brooke, so, and they're major planners when it comes to these large events in that space. So I'm assuming they've looked at this and kind of are giving the blessing that this works with their plans of how they want to lay out for future events.
Yeah, so this document was developed as a part of the Uptown Master Plan. So we're just taking it to that next stage. So the conceptual render, and I think I mentioned to the council when we talked about the contract was bringing this back, saying and just setting the stage like this is where we left off last with a concept that was a part of a planning document. So we're building from here. And we will start to dive into the questions that are being asked. This is all good information for RDG to take back and incorporate, provides us an opportunity to work with them to kind of walk through the questions. We'll have a steering committee yet to be appointed. That'll be not technical. It'll be stakeholder groups. And so they'll be able to review that. I think we're asking for a couple of members from the city council to be on that as well. So as we move forward, there'll be not only the council, but a sounding board that's not just, the city team bringing it forward. So Does that make sense? If there's any questions on that, please let me know. But that's why we wanted to do this, is like, hey, just a reminder where we are, and we're going to move forward, and there'll be decision points along the way. One of the questions and comments we had during our technical meeting was, hey, ICE is going to be a big deal. It's a large dollar figure. We want to assure everybody is supportive of it as we move forward. And so we'll get that information, incorporate in a design, and have an evaluation and go from there. So no different than the other features as well.
Well,
I just wanted to comment on what you were saying, Steve. That I look at that, I see it a little different the way than what you're kind of looking at. I see it as additional area for people to sit, because the majority of this is what 11th Street is. So if you look at, I don't know how to explain it on the map, but most of that green area, those green bands you're talking about, is in 11th Street right now. So it's going to be additional areas on 11th Street for people to sit and watch stuff. So I guess I'm seeing it a little differently than you are, as I see it as more event space.
If you look at the top part of the screen, you'll see the darker concrete that's on 7th. I know I can't point to it, Rachel's or Terrell, sorry. That aligns with the 11th Street. Patrick, please tell me if I'm wrong, but so you can see where it goes from dark to light. If you draw a line straight down, that would be essentially 11th Street. And the park board, if you recall, it indicated they didn't want to see the plaza to extend outside of the east triangle created by the sidewalks in the park. So that was their parameters. And so anyway, that's where that came from.
Can you go again on where the current sidewalk border for 11th Street is? Can you show us that line again?
West, are you?
I don't have a way.
The west,
Sidewalk? See where the sidewalk goes up, Steve?
Actually, there's the dark line that's
Oh,
pointing
yeah.
to the peace tree is about exactly where it's at. Anyway,
okay.
I
Well,
can do an illustration and send it to the councils just so you guys have it. You can kind of see.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of
Yep.
opportunities, I think, to delve into all that, but
Yeah.
did you have something else?
Yeah,
Mike?
just, and I think, Mr. Dunn, you'll appreciate this comment or question I'm going to ask. You know, we have some known use cases, you know, the various events that have traditionally been up in the park. I think what would be interesting is, against those known use cases, to put together perhaps some diagrammatic representations of how those kinds of events might be accommodated by this footprint. I think it would inform a broad constituency, not only my colleagues here on the city council, but also then those that are in our constituents are wondering, well, how's this going to work? Because their questions are going to be the same as ours. So to the degree we can emulate some of those use cases that we already know about would be great. And there might be some things that are on the cusp that we're thinking about, because we would have new space that we might also consider a use case and want to describe.
Mhm. Agreed. And we will illustrate diagrammatically how different events are accommodated based on what's there now and how that compares to the future.
I, for one, am very optimistic about the potential of this. I would just encourage everyone to remain open-minded and not be bound by our traditional way of using that space. I think if you go to many cities in the world, you don't find a park in the most visible, most valuable block of the city. You find a plaza where people gather. It is a lot more hard surfaces, not so much grass area. It's hard surfaces. It encourages people to come. I think we're thinking about those few events a year that we've had. And that's the whole idea of this, is to make this usable outside of just the programmed events where we have something on the stage and we get 2,000-3,000 people there. Those are great, but there are other spaces in the city where those can happen if it doesn't accommodate it. This, you know, your most visible spot in your city should be your most manicured spot in your city. It should have the flowers that you're talking about. It should have more hard surfaces. It should have opportunities that encourage people to come and just hang out. There doesn't have to be a concert going on. Until now, no one comes to that park, or few people go to that park if there isn't something programmed there, like a festival or a concert. And this is a spot that is the first image of that people have of our city when they drive through. This is what gives them the impression of our city. And so it should be more manicured. As I said, it should be active with people just hanging out, not necessarily there to do anything, but have a cup of coffee, talk to a friend, watch people walk by, whatever it is. And you see that in so many cities that you visit across the world. And that I'm a lover of parks, and I'm a lover of trees and grass and all of that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% of this space in the most visible, most valuable block of our town. I think there are other uses that encourage year-round use, variety of uses than just programmed events. So I'm just encouraging everybody to remain open-minded and be positive about where this could lead. And then I'm sure we'll all come to a consensus that everyone is happy with at the end. So, yes, sir.
Your Honor, Jill Ackerman, who's attending via Zoom, she has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Jill, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to jump in and mention that we were in a planning meeting today along with several other event planners from Marion. So I know Tammy, Brooke, and myself were all in that meeting along with Jessica from the city and Tony from the Parks Department. And they were asking, our feedback on this plan. Everyone is in favor of it. I know Lynn Chia from Farmer State Bank is being asked to weigh in on it. She's serving on a separate committee for the Plaza project. And we really like the flexibility of the spaces, especially the ice rink that, is going to be used in a very different way in the summer than it is in the winter time. And then also the ability to shut down 7th Avenue is really a game changer in terms of events. The events moving forward are going to look a lot different than just being in the park. We are going to utilize the 7th Avenue space. I think it'll be a really huge benefit to the business community. Just bringing patrons of those events up closer to our local businesses, I think is going to be a real benefit. So I just wanted to express our support of the program, and we are giving, lots of feedback. Deanna Nelson was in attendance at today's meeting as well. She's from Cedar Falls, and she's the event planner for Mark Kittrell. So she'll be working with the Broad and Main tenants and probably doing some events in Marion as well.
Okay. Thank you, Jill.
Sure.
Anyone else? Do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you.
Thank you for all your work, and we look forward to going through this process.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on that, Tom, or did we move on to the next presentation? All right, next presentation is our annual audit report.
Jennifer Decker from Hogan Hanson is actually participating electronically here to give a presentation.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Jennifer Decker, and I am with the firm of Hogan Hanson. I wanted to first thank you for allowing us the opportunity to perform the city's audit this year. I would also like to thank Leanne Carey, as well as the city staff, for their assistance in completing our audit. Hogan Hanson issued an unmodified opinion for the year ended June 30, 2021, and overall the city is in financially good condition. I would like to share a few highlights from the 2021 audit, which presents the financial statements of the city on the accrual basis of accounting, which is different than the cash basis of accounting used by the city throughout the year. The city's total governmental fund balances, which includes the general fund, debt service fund, capital projects fund, and special revenue funds, increased by approximately $4.9 million for the year. General obligation debt increased by $8.86 million. As of June 30, 2021, the general fund, which is the chief operating fund of the city, had a fund balance of $15.8 million. The total expenditures of the general fund for the year ended were approximately $24.4 million. The city's total business type activities net position increased approximately $355,000. The city's business type activities include the sewer rental replacement, city communication and utility, solid waste replacement, urban forest utility, urban forest replacement, and the stormwater management funds. The city's financial statements also include data of the component units: the Marion Water Department, Friends of the Marion Library and the Foundation, Marion Parks and Recreation Foundation, as well as the Marion Firefighters Association. Even though these entities are legally separate, since the city is financially accountable for them and the relationship is such that exclusion from the financial statements would cause the financial statements to be misleading or incomplete, they have been included. Of particular note this year, the Capital Projects Fund ended the fiscal year with a $28 million balance compared to a $35 million in the prior year. The city experienced a derecho thunderstorm on August 10th, 2020, which was the most devastating storm in the city's history. The city received a federal public assistance disaster declaration, which allowed the city to request reimbursement of up to 85%, of which 75% was federal and 10% was state, for debris removal, emergency protection measures, and other repair projects throughout the city. Revenue and expenditures were tracked in a derecho project within the Capital Projects Fund. $19.2 million was expended by the city for both its properties and the community cleanup. The city received $7.5 million from FEMA and $2.4 million from insurance. A receivable exists of $6.3 million from FEMA and $1.8 million from the state at year end. During the year ended June 30, the city of Marion expended over $750,000 in federal expenditures. On page 73 of your audit report, it details the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, or the CFA. And due to meeting the threshold, the city underwent additional audits over its two major federal programs. This year, those were Highway Planning and Construction, CFDA number 20.205, and the disaster grants for presidentially declared disasters, which is CFDA 97.036. We have on pages 76 through 78 our audit report over the major federal programs. During our audit, we are also required to report internal control deficiencies. On pages 79 and 80 of the report, we've summarized our findings. We noted two material weaknesses in regards to segregation of duties and financial statement preparation. These are both repeat comments from prior years. We are also required to summarize other findings related to statutory reporting. These are found on pages 80 through 82 of the report. I will go through them now. Disbursements did not exceed the amounts in the certified budget. There was a questionable expenditure noted for a flower arrangement in the amount of $143. We do note that it's possible for the expenditure to meet the test of serving a public purpose under certain circumstances, but should be subject to a deserves close scrutiny. No expenditures of city money were noted for travel expenses of spouses of city officials or employees. No business transactions were noted between the city and city officials or employees. No transactions were noted between the city officials or city employees in compliance with Chapter 68B of the Code of Iowa. Surety bond coverage of city officials and employees is in accordance with statutory provisions. No transactions were noted that we believe should have been approved in the council minutes, but were not. The council minutes were published in accordance with the Code of Iowa. We noted no instances of non-compliance with the deposit investment provisions of chapters 12B and C. In relation to revenue bonds, section 6 of the sewer revenue bond agreement requires sewer rates to be established which are sufficient to produce and maintain net revenue at a level not less than 125% of principal and interest. During the fiscal year, net revenue was a deficit $64,055, while principal and interest payments were $171,140. So the city will need to conduct rate analysis to ensure compliance going forward. The annual urban renewal report was properly approved and certified to the Iowa Department of Management. The city completed and filed its June 30 annual financial report by the December 1st deadline. And that is the statutory area of the report. Citizens interested in reviewing a copy of the audit can obtain one from the finance department, or it's also on the Iowa State Auditor's website. If there's any specific questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. I'm sure there were some questions. None? Go ahead.
Maybe this is more for Ryan, you and your team. I'm interested in the schedule of findings. I think there are two of them that are recurring. And I guess the question is one of them, I'll use the segregation of duties as an example. Do we have a strategy to keep it from reoccurring again?
Councilman, that is short-term, no. That is a fairly common finding in municipalities, the segregation of duties. One thing that we have talked about, the elected officials and us, as we went through the budget hearing at the end of January, was making sure our staffing levels are appropriate. The staffing levels in our finance department, I would anticipate, would be one of those reviews that we would do. That could help in the long run, but it is a fairly common finding for municipalities.
And we've made some progress over time with that, but we would have to hire a lot more people to meet that.
I was gonna say,
standard.
segregation of duties is just one of those that you're gonna have. I mean, it's to the extent of you have one person open the mail, one person then is actually reading the mail, and then they're passing it to, I mean, it goes pretty in depth. It's one you're gonna have.
Well, and
Mhm.
I'm more familiar with in a information security environment, segregation of duties. So I guess the real question is, it's not necessarily just adding headcount. It might be, in fact, retooling some processes in order to compensate for that finding, which, and maybe this is then the question for our presenter, Jennifer. How do we show complete closure of these items so that they don't remain on a reoccurring risk register for us?
Well, it's unlikely that you would have enough headcount and properly mitigated, like there's a way you could properly mitigate controls. However, you're still going to have a finding for segregation of duties. And same with like the financial statement preparation comment, because you rely on your audit firm to do the cash to accrual conversions for the most part, and you're not employing another CPA firm to write full GAAP disclosures. It's cost prohibitive for the city to not have these findings.
Yeah, well, good question, Grant. Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Jennifer? Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you, guys.
All right, moving on with our agenda. There are no items marked by staff for discussion on the consent agendas. Are there any questions in particular about any particular items? Yes, Mr. Waller.
Your Honor, just as it relates to the prior discussion, A7, A6 and A7 on the consent would speak directly to Councilman Harper's question about process review. So having that position move from the city manager's office into the finance department is certainly going to help Leanne and her team in the finance department look at how we process financial related items.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments, discussion on any item on the consent agendas before we move on to the regular agenda? Okay, under the regular agenda, administrative services, the first item is marked for discussion. Who's handling that? Ryan, go ahead.
Your Honor, members of council, this is something that we spoke about when we were talking about the sewer rate adjustment that we received from Cedar Rapids and the work that we will be engaging with Cedar Rapids as they look to rehab and modify their wastewater treatment facility moving forward. We have had conversations with our partners at Hiawatha who are going through the same process. So they will be asking approval from their elected body for a very similar agreement so we can work together.
Okay. Any questions on that item? Pretty clear? All right. A2 and A3 are not marked. Any questions on those? Okay, B1.
Yes, Your Honor and Council, this is the project calendar for the demolition of the new public service facility. The way we program this is that we would let the project on February 18th. Bids would be due March 15th. We'd bring it back to council for a public hearing and approval March 17th. And then the project start date would be April 1st. We have programmed 60 calendar days. So the goal is to get this done by the end of May. However, with the people we've reached out to, we think we'll get it done much sooner than that. So any questions?
Questions? Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
E1 and E2 are not marked. Any questions on those? Okay, E3.
Yes, Your Honor. E3 is our project calendar for the Echo Hill and Albernet Road Roundabout. This does have $500,000 that we got through the TSIP or Traffic Safety Improvement Programs, the DOT. So the details of the bid and the working days is up there. We are working with the school district on this. That's the late start date so that the school session can be done and start the project. And there's additional information in your council packet.
Questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, when will we, I drove out there this morning just to look at that intersection. I'm having a wee of a time trying to figure out how traffic's gonna move through there during the project and certainly once the school year starts. Just the way you look at the 4 different corners. So when will that information about how that traffic flow will be managed? Will that be coming out at the time this bid comes through or after?
So in our construction plans, we have what's called the J sheets or the staging sheets, and I can send that to city council prior to Thursday so you can see those. That is staff's recommendation on how to stage it to keep it open. Depending on the contractor that gets the low bid, they may come to us and say, hey, we would like to do it this way that's completely different. So it's not necessarily the way that's going to be built, but it's a way that it can be built.
And then I saw you had another milestone in there that they have to meet by August 5th. Is that related to this traffic flow, I assume?
Yeah.
For school
so
start?
basically how it works, there's certain times when you're not going to be able to go north or south or west. And so
Right.
we have, in order to build this while it's open to traffic. And so we need to get certain sections open back before school starts.
Yeah, that's gonna be really challenging out there because it's the only way in and out of those 2 schools. So.
Yep.
That's gonna be a
There
doozy.
is, just for council's awareness, there is the emergency access through the trail in the back as well.
Right.
So fire and police do have that at their disposal.
Yeah, I remember that. I'm just thinking about everybody else. All right, thanks.
And kind of a follow-up on that, there's also a growing neighborhood there too, and that is their only way in and out of that neighborhood, right? There's not a north
Correct.
exit out of that neighborhood
is.
on Albernet.
There is not another connection. There have been other proposals come in to add additional houses up there, and the fire department has actually stopped them because of the lack of access at this point.
But they'll be able to get in and out during construction. It'll just be
Yes.
limited.
They might be limited in what direction they can go when they get to this intersection, but they will be able to get out.
They have to go up to County Line Road.
Anyone else? Anything else to add on that one, Mike?
No, I can send out the J sheets for council so you can see the proposed staging.
Okay. The next item is E4.
So E4 is a project calendar for the Lau Park parking lot and driveway. So essentially from 10th Street and everything south of the Lau facility will be a mill and fill. So we'll remove some existing HMA out there and put in new HMA. So this is a parks project that we're just designed and bidding for them.
Okay. Cross department collaboration, I like it. Anyone questions? Okay, thank you. Next item, E5.
So similar, this is the Tabi Park. So redoing the parking lot that's off of 31st and then going in and adding a connection trail to the west. We will add the driveways off of the street so that in the future, a sidewalk can be added. I know there was a TAC item that came up at one point, but there's not money in this budget to put that sidewalk in with this, but we'll put the driveways in so that that is there and ready to connect those. So we don't have to take the driveways back out.
Okay, questions? Yes, go ahead, Will.
So the parking lot's gonna stay the same design, the two entrances. So I guess my question is, where's the market gonna go while this is under construction, Seth?
So we're looking at starting this towards the end of September. So there's going to be 2 market dates that are affected for it towards then. And so we believe we've talked about relocating or just cutting it off then and prorating those days, because there is still that fall market for this in City Square still take place.
So start no later than 9/26. What if they want to start mid-August? That's gonna affect.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially will affect, could affect the bids, but if this year's anything like last year, we had all the way up to November to December for construction. So.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so they could start September 12th.
Okay,
Thanks, Brent.
thanks.
Any questions on that item? All right. Thank you, Mike. Under community development, there are 2 items that are not marked. Questions on those? Okay, on to the last page, we have a discussion and direction regarding Marion Airport layout plan. For this item, I will turn over the gavel to the Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, who's leading this discussion?
I can start. At the last council meeting, our partners at Medco had provided an update on the MEC park and the development of. And during that time, Mr. Glue had noted that they've had a lot of interest in that we're limited on available land, and the discussion turned into the reservations or the holding of land to allow for the build out of the ALP, which had an east-west runway. And at the council meeting, staff was directed to include this on as a discussion item, so we can get so that we can get direction on that request as it relates to the east-west runway.
Yeah, Ryan, as I researched this a little bit, and I think in the council memo in the packet, there was reference to a resolution that was acted on July 2nd, 2019. And it was, I think, resolution number 27752. And at that time, council put an emphasis on work and designations for the north-south runway. In the minutes, I didn't see that it had, I guess, unobligated ourselves from consideration of an east-west runway, but it might just have been how the discussion went relative to the minutes produced. I guess I have, based on our prior discussion on this, and certainly Nick Glue's presentation to us at here the last cycle of meetings, I think that we could take and through resolution reaffirm or affirm that no east-west runway would exist relative to the airport. And also perhaps in that same resolution, merely state an affirmative action that we work over the next many months to revise the ALP for that purpose, as well as to develop a sharper focus on what our future considerations for the airport will be. And then that way, I think through a single resolution, it frees up Medco to do whatever they think they need to do with the property held in reservation, and puts us on a path then to really recalibrate the ALP for near-term and longer-term purposes that we might envision.
Yeah, I'll reiterate my comment that I made at that meeting a year and a half ago, back in 2019, that as far as my overall opinion about the ALP, I certainly understood the benefit and the necessity of the north-south runway, whether it's 4,000 or 5,000 feet. That was part of that discussion. That can be figured out in the future. But again, I'll reiterate the same comment and opinion I made a year and a half ago, and that is I do not support an east-west runway in the ALP. So based upon that, I would support the direction that Grant has outlined.
Thank you. I have nothing else to add to that other than I will once again support my previous colleagues' comments on that as far as not supporting an east-west runway. So I think it's time that we're probably needing to take some serious look at this, make some adjustments to it, and allow the stakeholders as far as the real estate out there to be able to move laterally moving forward with that. So I as well will not be supporting any east-west runway to help move us forward with a trajectory for the airport. Thanks.
I have a question. So, because back in 2019 when we discussed this, I think I was the lone person in favor of continuing to have an east-west runway in the ALP. And I still think that's important because we don't know 20 years down the road if we're gonna need that. So my question is it feasible to build the runway further to the east if it was ever to be built so that it's not affecting the land over on the west side of the runway? I mean, is that even possible? And I don't know if that's a staff or maybe Grant might know or.
So let me just comment on that, Will, from my rudimentary understanding of all of this. In a perfect world, I understand it's nice to have opposite runways in order to support different wind conditions. But equivalently, if there are proper enhancements made to a single direction runway, in this case north-south, you can negate to some degree some crosswind considerations that pilots need to fundamentally fly against. One of those ways that you do that is by lengthening the runway so that they then can make their approach at slightly different velocities than what they might otherwise intend to, or have a longer run out so that they can manage their on ground. I guess I was going to say driving, but that didn't seem to fit. So I guess the thing that comes to mind is the east-west runway, again, from my understanding, is going to require an approach over an area that has lots of buildings. And it just doesn't appear to be optimum, I think, from the potential or existing development that is in those areas. From my perspective, and this is just my opinion, I think we would be better suited to put our attentions on appropriate adjustments and build outs that enhance the north-south in order then to give us the opportunity to change our perhaps the air traffic in and out of the field, the airfield. Specifically, does, you know, logical changes that could be made to perhaps bring in different classes of aircraft, perhaps charter and the like. But these are all considerations that, you know, haven't been soaked through completely. And that's really what I suggested in my initial comment. Through resolution, we affirm that east-west is being dropped from any further consideration, and then to get about the business of really developing a logical vision to address current safety considerations at the airport, as well as then to perhaps paint a vision that gives us greater traffic in and out. So that's what I'm kind of advocating for.
Okay.
With no decision made on the latter half of that, because there's too much thinking that has to go into it.
Yeah, I think what we're really talking about tonight is a reaffirmation of the informal discussion, or the discussion we had a year and a half ago, which did not support the east-west runway, but none of that discussion resulted in any modifications to the ALP.
Right.
So we're not here to completely redo the ALP, although based upon a number of items that Grant just referred to and talked about, improvements that may need to be considered down in the future on what should be done for that north-south runway. I think what we're really saying is go back to that discussion a year and a half ago and should we formally be eliminating the east-west runway out of the ALP now, so that Medco and others can make plans according to that. Because since with the ALP as it sits there today, there's a lot of land that is restricted on what can be done. So I think what we're really trying to say is, if everybody's opinion is similar to a year and a half ago, and there's not support of the east-west runway, let's move ahead, eliminate that aspect of it, and allow for potential development of land that Medco has and other people that own land around that potential east-west runway to be moving on with whatever plans they may want to consider. So, and we've already made improvements, obviously, to that north-south runway that already make it better by making it 60-foot wide. So that's already a huge improvement, but there's more that are obviously needed.
So discussion and direction. So it sounds like a resolution should probably be put on a future agenda, and then we can have a vote to see if we would like to move forward with that or not.
If there is consensus, what we would do is we would take Councilman Harper's comments. We would make sure we did the necessary research and made sure that that accomplished what the council's looking for.
Sounds good. comments? Questions? Okay. Moving on, Mayor, you coming back for the next one? I think he is. I will turn the gavel back over to the mayor once he gets up here. There we go. Back to the mayor.
Okay, design standards.
I'm getting rebel roused from the crowd here today. So the council directed staff to take a look at design standards for the community. I think a couple of meetings ago, we had indicated that kind of the general direction. I wanted to just give you a briefing on the ordinance that we've provided to Planning Commission as a draft ordinance, just kind of bringing the council along as it relates to the standards. And as I'd indicate, I'm not going to read this ordinance to you. It was in your packet. There's a lot of information and outlines really the statement of intent, where it applies, the standards being proposed, and the process upon which it's following. I think what's important to understand as you read through this, we can create a design standard manual that's a 1/2 inch thick that addresses every material, every window treatment, deck treatment. We can go to the nth degree. But I think at this point, what's important is that we just at least get a standard in place that addresses the areas of concern that I think most people have in a broad brush perspective. If there's a desire to come back and refine these, which I think there is, but I don't know that that's a point of conversation for today, at least we have some standard in place, because there are areas of the community where there are no design standards, period. And as we rezone the community, we've rezoned 2 wards, and we go through the process of rezoning other wards, there are zonings that have occurred that had conditions upon them. And when that property is rezoned, those conditions go away. For many, many years, we've rezoned property with conditioned upon design standards. So if we rezone it from a C3 district, such as Tower Terrace Road, that has design standards, and then we eliminate the design standards and rezone it to something different, those standards go away. So in order to ensure that we are taking the community, and one commercial developer is treated similar to another commercial developer, whether it's on 151 or Tower Terrace Road, is important. Now, I say that excluding areas where there's a planned development. The planned unit developments, the neighborhood in Indian Creek is a planned unit development. East Town Plaza, I think is the new name, east of 13, north of 151, that's a planned development. And the central corridor standards that were developed as a form-based code, those are a separate ordinance. But what we've done is we've drawn from those PUDs, because we've got pretty standard language for commercial design standards, and that's what we're looking to apply at this point. And if you turn to the details on page 2, it really gets back to, and those that have been on the council for a while, remember the corridor standards that we had in place. It really gets back to really just outlining that there's a 75% primary material and a 25% trim material. The 75 being a hardy material, stone, brick, architectural concrete, textured block. So it really gets into ensuring that you have a mix of materials. There's one that's going to be a more hardy, and then the trim can be some of the you can even have, so as an example, ornamental design features. Gosh, what am I trying to say here? Looking forward. So it'd really be the standards outside of the concrete and brick and stone that you could use as trim material. So we don't get into a lot of the detail of it, but these are those areas of the building that would be the cornice work. You know, we've had folks that bring in EFS in the past, and this, we're not saying that we want to see much of that in the trim material, but we certainly don't want to see it as a primary material. And so we've had experience with that where that has failed and it doesn't look good. So really it's getting into where we're going to look at the design perspective. 75% primary material, hardy, 25% can be others. But we're not getting into a very specific definition of those. That would be where the submittal and the site plan would come in, as provided in the ordinance. Staff would do an internal review of that. Planning Commission would approve it. And if there's a determination by the Planning Commission that the petitioner does not like, it would come to the council, and there'd be and they'd take 3/4 of the council to override the Planning Commission's determination. So, I mean, I don't want to walk through this all, but you guys have had it. I would take questions. This is kind of where we're at in the ordinance adoption. And you don't have to give me all your feedback now. You can provide it to us over the next couple of weeks. We are trying to get this to the Planning Commission in March, and we'd like to get this rolling. Obviously, as an ordinance, we'd have to have a public hearing of both Planning Commission, City Council, and then there's 3 readings. So there's a desire to get it moving, but obviously we wanted to get a draft to you before we got too far down the road.
The ideal time to have comments and would be now.
Yeah.
Before you get to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, in the
before
next
it
couple of
starts through
weeks.
the process.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? I haven't delved into them in detail, so I'll be looking at them and giving you my comments, but anybody else have comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I as well have not looked at these in detail yet, but Tom, let me see if I can bring this up a notch or two. The objective here is to set design standards that are applicable everywhere for every developer.
That is correct, except there's exceptions, and I probably should point these out. We have not addressed industrial uses, so we're not touching industrial. The MEC is its own plan development, has its own set of standards, but industrial is not addressed in this. Neither are 1, 2, 3, or 4 unit buildings. So if you have a single family home to a 4 unit are not being addressed in this.
Okay. So
Residential buildings.
Correct, residents. So
Okay.
it's multifamily being 5 units and above, and then commercial properties.
okay, but it's a step improvement from where we sit today.
Absolutely.
And then we learn from this incremental adjustment and then make future adjustments as we're compelled to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. The big change is that commercial and multifamily site plans will go to the Planning Commission for approval after review by the internal team. And if there's something that goes they don't like, it comes to the council for determination. I would say that most plans are already working through that process, but ultimately come to the city council just because of most of the new development is happening in areas that were rezoned with conditions applied that require the standards that we're talking about now. So it's an oddity that you wouldn't see the plans currently. So
Remind me of the term you used, 75%, what kind of materials?
primary exterior.
Primary.
Yep.
Okay, so primary meaning,
Primary exterior shall consist of a combination of brick, natural stone, architectural
Okay.
concrete panels, textured concrete block, or
Okay.
architectural steel or stone panels.
okay.
So an architectural.
I think
steel.
this is a great start. I think it's a big improvement, but, but I think what Grant said is valid, that we could start with this, and then as you see how it's working, if it's really too much, you can always dial it back. If it's, you can always improve it as we move on, as we see how it's operating in actual fact. But I think it's an improvement to have design standards. This would take care of my constant issue with, right?
Yep.
Highway 13 and whatever else, metal buildings and.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, it would require some kind of stone or some kind of other material to break up the.
Yep.
Okay. That's great. In my view, anyway.
I concur.
Sarah, then Will. Yep.
I thank you for following through on this. As we talked about it back in our Days with Blue Zones project, and the health of the community. I also love to see that as we're bringing people in to build in our community, that they are putting their best efforts. I mean, I want owners that care about what they're building, and I want the people who have already invested in our community to be protected and their values protected by quality buildings around them. So I appreciate you all looking into this. And I guess my biggest question is what you said on the change on the process, but that is something I will get up to speed on later as I learn those steps of what was and what would be. But thank you for putting this together for us to start reviewing.
Absolutely.
Will?
Most of my questions were answered already, but so if let's say a fourplex of apartments wants to get built, that would not apply because it's
Correct.
4
units.
I guess I still have some concern that I talked about the last time we discussed this, just the lower, there's still a need for some lower priced buildings. And if we have higher standards, which I'm not against higher standards, don't get me wrong, but that could hurt some development. Because like I talked about with before, there's, if you want a new building, you want to rent space in a new building, commercial, prices are pretty high. And a lot of that has to do with the buildings and how the materials that have to be built. And I just have concerns that we could be pricing out some businesses out of Marion and going into Cedar Rapids or wherever.
I hear what you're saying and I understand it. I think one thing that we're going to be able to, we'll be able to draw on as a resource to address some of that concern that you have, not necessarily the aesthetics, but the affordability factor and where things are going in the market. At the last meeting, there was direction to proceed with housing needs assessment. And one of those comments, and there is going to be that market or one of those things that need to be addressed, a market study. And I think that's going to be something that is going to be enlightening to the council. As I speak to my partners across the state, there's a whole different realm of how housing is getting done. I'm sure you've heard single family rentals are a huge deal in the greater metro areas. So to address that issue. So I'm not saying that's an answer, but I think there's going to be a conversation through that housing needs assessment and housing study that's going to really bring to light other things that are going on in the market that'll help, address those issues. So,
Colette.
Just a quick question. How do we determine 5? Right, there's a break between 4 versus 5. So what criteria, how did we come up with that criteria? So design standards for, right, anything that has more than 4 residents, right? Or 4, I guess, groups, units,
Yeah.
whatever you want to say. How do we determine that?
So if that is completely an internal and Marion deal, for many, many years, and I think most of you would know this just by driving around it, we didn't build anything over a 4-plex for a very long period of time. Multifamily, there were years where we didn't build maybe 1 or 2 buildings over a 4-plex or none at all. So multifamily is kind of a new, enter the market is new. And so as that entered, there was a lot of concerns about how that was looking. And we had a project in town that really drove the desire for there to be more oversight on that. So it's over the years, it's been anything over a 4-plex. And I think we even outline it in our zoning code that anything over a 4-plex is considered multifamily. So we talk about a single family, a duplex, 3-plex, or a 4-plex, and then it's multifamily. It's kind of a division line within the ordinance, and it's driven primarily by the market that's occurred in Marion over the years. That's probably the best answer.
Yeah, it's a good question. Anything else? Any other questions? So, Tom, are you looking for direction?
At this point, I'd seek comments in the next, over the next couple of weeks. If there's comments, we're planning to go to the Planning Commission unless there's a significant pushback from the council that you want to see more on this. So.
Okay, so I think we have homework to do to go through it. And if anyone has major objections to anything or thinks something is completely, inappropriate or we need to look at it, then talk to Tom and then if we need to consider it here, we can do that, whatever needs to happen.
And obviously we hold a public hearing at the Planning Commission. So if comments are received, those will be forwarded to the city council when the public hearing is held here or at the set date, we can highlight any issues or concerns that are brought forward. And if there's overwhelming concerns, obviously that means we got to probably take a peek at something. So
thanks.
We'll keep you updated.
I know this
and
stuff
informed.
takes a lot of time and appreciate you putting the time into it and to bring it to us. So
Thank you.
okay. So this is, we are doing the discussion on Marion Township Fire and Emergency Service.
Yes.
Okay,
Good evening.
my copy of the agenda says postponed, so maybe not. Go ahead.
Yes. Actually, the city manager and I thought it'd be better if we go ahead and just give you a heads up about this. Because I've had several discussions with the Marion Township. And we've had a contract with the township in the past for years, where we have given service for emergency calls out to the township. And they have paid the city so much money and gave us equipment and things like that. Well, the population continues to decline in the township. The land area continues to decline with the city's annexations. Our call volume to the township has declined. And so we need to relook at how we've contracted with the township to better serve them and to better serve the city. So we've been in discussions, and I just wanted to let you know that we are putting a contract together with the township that I think will benefit the city more with our budget, but yet help the fire department to better equip 3 stations and maybe 4 stations. The township can help tremendously with that. So we're looking at changing things and maybe getting their help in doing so. So I just want to make you aware that we're working on that, so you don't hear it from someone else. And I'll probably have more next month on that.
Okay.
Okay?
Are you willing to take questions? Looks like you
Yeah,
might have a
I can take
question. Go
questions.
ahead.
I
Yeah.
do have a question.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the difference is between a town, a township, and a county. Can you help me understand that?
The county
Hopefully,
is
I'm
made,
not the only one.
the county is made up of townships. And if you look at state code, township in each county is responsible for the cemeteries in the rural areas that are not encompassed in a municipality, the cemeteries and the emergency services. That's their only budgetary responsibility according to state code. So each township has a board of trustees, and those trustees have a budget, and they obtain their money from the county taxes. So the board of supervisors, they work with them to get their monies to pay for those services. So because they are responsible for providing emergency services, some townships actually have their own fire department. Monroe Township to the northwest has a fire department. Springville, it's called the Springville Fire Department, but it's actually Brown Township. So Marion Township does not have a fire service, and they've always contracted with the city in order to provide that service. So that's kind of how it works.
That's not confusing, is it?
No.
But thanks for explaining that. I think
Sure.
that's very helpful.
Yeah.
The trustees also take care of fences too, right?
I think
Yeah.
so. I think they do the rulings on the fences.
That's right. Okay, so
More to come.
more to come. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yep.
And great article in the paper.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the closed session, Mr. Brandt.
Mayor, I make a motion to adjourn to closed session regarding litigation and as permitted under section 21.51C of the Code of Iowa, and personnel matters, city manager performance evaluation as permitted under section 21.51I of the Code of Iowa, 2 separate measures.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding litigation as permitted under section 21.51C of the code, and personnel matters as permitted under section 21.51I of the code. Okay, first of all, can we have the attorney's statement?
Your Honor, I have reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed sessions and find the same to be appropriate under IO Code Section 21.51C, and pending the city manager's request to go into closed session, I would also find the second matter appropriate under Section 21.51I.
I have to backtrack a little bit. Did we have a second on that motion? We did. Okay, I didn't hear it. Okay, great. Thank you, Carol. Do we have the city manager's approval?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, any questions or comments before we vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mayor Abu Osley,
Yes,
Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Menzer,
Yes.
Mr. Sterned.
Yes.
we have a unanimous vote. We're now adjourned to closed session. Thank you for joining us.